A 2,000-year-old scroll from the Roman town of Herculaneum has been digitally unwrapped. The document was badly burnt by the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD.
Imagine a book that you can't open without turning it to dust. That was the problem with the Herculaneum scrolls for centuries. They were locked in carbon, their secrets fused by heat. But here is the catch. The ink wasn't just on the paper, it created a microscopic 3D texture. Using a particle accelerator, we finally peeled back the layers. The words that came out are rewriting the history books right now. We found a witness to the death of the Roman Republic, and his warning has been waiting for us for 2 millennia. The Caesar Connection, 79 AD. That is the year the world ended for the people of the Bay of Naples. We have all heard of Mount Vesuvius blowing its top, burying Pompeii in ash. But while Pompeii was getting rained on by pebbles, its neighbor Herculaneum faced something much worse. It was hit by a pyroclastic surge. This was a wall of superheated gas and rock moving at hurricane speeds, clocking in at over 600 degrees Fahrenheit. It didn't just bury the city, it flash-fried it. And in one specific house, the grandest villa in the entire region, something incredible happened. This house was the Villa of the Papyri. It wasn't just a vacation home, it was a palace owned by Lucius Calpurnius Piso. That name might not ring a bell, but his son-in-law will. Piso was the father-in-law of Julius Caesar. This place was the epicenter of Roman power, a spot where the elite gathered to talk politics away from the ears of the Senate. And inside this villa was a library, a massive collection of 1,800 scrolls. When the surge hit, the heat was so intense it carbonized the scrolls instantly. It turned the papyrus into pure charcoal in a fraction of a second. But here's the crazy part. It didn't burn them to ash. The lack of oxygen meant they didn't crumble away. They were preserved, frozen in time as solid black cylinders. They were entombed under 60 feet of volcanic mud that hardened into rock. Fast forward 1,700 years. It is the 1750s. Workmen are digging tunnels under the modern Italian town of Herculaneum. They break into the buried villa. They find marble statues, mosaic floors, and these strange black lumps of charcoal. They had no idea what they were. In fact, the workers thought they were just burned logs or briquettes. They actually threw some of them on the fire to keep warm. They were burning the only surviving library from antiquity to heat their coffee. It wasn't until one dropped and broke open that they saw the layers. They realized these were books, but every time they tried to open them, the scrolls shattered. They were as fragile as a burnt piece of toast. If you touched them, they turned to dust. For centuries, scholars tried everything. They used knives, mercury, rosewater. A monk even built a machine to unroll them by millimeters a day. It was a disaster. They destroyed hundreds of scrolls trying to read just a few words. The text they did find was fascinating, mostly philosophy by a guy named Philodemus. But the damage was catastrophic. The unrolled scrolls were barely readable, the ink black on black carbon. It seemed like a dead end. The vast majority of the collection, hundreds of scrolls, were left in storage, too dangerous to touch. They sat there, lumps of mystery, mocking the historians. We knew the lost history of Rome was inside, but we had no way to get it out. We were locked out of the library. But here's where the story shifts. We stopped trying to use our hands and started using physics. In the early 21st century, the game changed. We realized we didn't need to open the scrolls to read them. We needed to see through them. But standard X-rays were useless. The ink on these scrolls was made of carbon, soot and gum, and the paper was carbonized papyrus. Carbon on carbon. On a normal X-ray, it all looks the same, invisible. It was like trying to find a black cat in a dark room. Scientists were stuck. They knew the data was there, but they couldn't see it. The scrolls remained a black box, literally. It seemed like the Villa of the Papyri would keep its secrets forever. But then, a computer scientist from Kentucky named Brent Seals had an idea that sounded like science fiction. He didn't want to just scan the scrolls, he wanted to virtually unwrap them using math. And to do it, he needed a light source so powerful it shouldn't even exist on Earth. The technology was ready, but the scrolls were hiding one final trap: the $1 million algorithm. Dr. Brent Seals knew that regular medical CT scans weren't enough. They were too blurry. He needed resolution at the level of a micron, that is smaller than a red blood cell. To get that, he took the scrolls to the Diamond Light Source in the UK. This is a particle accelerator, a synchrotron. It speeds up electrons until they are moving near the speed of light, generating X-rays 10 billion times brighter than the sun. They placed the fragile, charged scroll, now codenamed P-Herc-172, into the beam. The machine spun it around, capturing thousands of images from every angle. But remember the problem: carbon ink on carbon paper. The team was gambling on something called phase contrast. Here is the deal. Even though the ink and paper are chemically similar, the ink sits on top of the paper. It has a tiny microscopic thickness. When the X-rays pass through that tiny bump of ink, they slow down just a fraction. This creates a phase shift. It is like seeing a clear glass sculpture in clear water. You can see the edges because of how the light bends. The synchrotron could detect that tiny texture. The scan produced terabytes of data. But looking at the raw images, it just looked like static. It looked like a mess of crushed lattice. The scroll wasn't rolled up neatly like a carpet. The volcanic pressure had crushed it, twisted it, and warped it. It was a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle from hell. Seals and his team developed a process called volume cartography. They had to trace a single layer of papyrus through the twisted mess, flatten it out digitally, and then look for the texture of the ink. It was painstakingly slow. They proved it was possible, but they didn't have the manpower to read hundreds of scrolls. So in 2023, they did something brilliant. They open-sourced the data. They launched the Vesuvius Challenge. They released the high-res scans of the scrolls to the internet and offered over $1 million in prizes to anyone who could build an AI to read them. The internet went wild. You had physics students, former robotics engineers, and coding prodigies diving in. They weren't archaeologists. They were data miners. And then, in late 2023, it happened. A 21-year-old computer science student named Luke Ferrator noticed a crackle in the data, a pattern. He trained a machine learning model to look for that specific crackle texture that indicated ink. He ran the program, and on his screen, 3 letters popped up: P-O-R, porphyros, purple. It was the ancient Greek word for purple dye. It was the first word read from inside an unopened scroll in 2,000 years. The floodgates opened. Another student, Youssef Nader, refined the model. Suddenly, we weren't just seeing letters, we were seeing sentences, paragraphs, columns of text. The AI was doing in seconds what had stumped humanity for centuries. The contest organizers announced the grand prize winners, a team of 3 students who had unlocked thousands of characters. But the real shock wasn't just that we could read it, it was what we were reading. The first major text to emerge wasn't just a random note. It was a heavy, complex work of philosophy about the senses, about music, and about pleasure. It was the work of Philodemus, the resident philosopher of the villa. The scans revealed that the ink contained trace amounts of lead, something we didn't think Romans did. This metallic signature made the letters pop even more for the AI. We were suddenly looking at the handwriting of a man who lived in the 1st century BC, staring at his thoughts on food, music, and the good life. But as the AI dug deeper, the tone of the translation started to change. They weren't just talking about music anymore, they were talking about something much darker. The Hidden Anxiety. The author was Philodemus of Gadara. Before these scrolls, he was a footnote in history. Now he is becoming one of the most important voices from the ancient world. He was an Epicurean. Now today we think Epicurean means someone who likes fancy food and wine. But back then it was a serious philosophy about finding peace. The goal was ataraxia, freedom from anxiety. Why was the father-in-law of Julius Caesar keeping an Epicurean guru in his basement? Because Rome was stressful. The Republic was falling apart. There were civil wars, assassinations, and riots. The elite needed a way to cope. Philodemus was their therapist. The text decoded by the AI is fascinating. It comes from a book called On Music and another called On Vices. In the scroll, Philodemus is arguing with his rivals, the Stoics. He writes about how music affects the soul, whether it can make you a better person. He argues that the senses, taste, sound, sight, are the source of truth. But look closer at the words the AI found. Phobos, fear, hedon, pleasure, epithemia, desire. He isn't just writing abstract theory, he is diagnosing a sick society. He writes about the agony of scarcity and the emptiness of abundance. He is writing to powerful Romans who have everything, money, slaves, power, and are still miserable. It is a self-help book for the masters of the universe. He tells them that their ambition is eating them alive. He critiques the madness of wanting more. This is incredible because he is likely reading this aloud to the very men who are causing the chaos. The AI picked up something else. The handwriting varies. There are corrections in the margins. This suggests these weren't just finished books, they were drafts. We are looking at the working papers of a think tank. The Villa of the Papyri was an intellectual bunker where they tried to figure out how to live a good life while the world burned down outside. The text mentions the scarcity of things. It talks about how people panic when they think they don't have enough. It is eerily modern. But then the Vesuvius challenge team found something that wasn't philosophy. As they scanned deeper into other scrolls, the Greek letters gave way to something else. Latin, the language of war, the language of the Senate. Most of the library was Greek philosophy, but there was a Latin section that had been much harder to find. The AI reconstruction pulled up phrases that didn't fit the chill vibe of Philodemus. Bellorum Civilium, of the Civil Wars, Caesaris Concilia, Caesar's plans. This stopped the historians in their tracks. We have very few primary sources from the Roman Civil Wars. Most of what we know was written decades or centuries later by people who weren't there. But this was written during the events. The handwriting matched a style from the late Republic. The ink analysis showed high-quality lead content, indicating an important document. And then a name emerged from the noise. Seneca. Not Seneca the Younger, the famous Stoic who tutored Nero, but his father, Seneca the Elder. We thought his greatest historical work was lost forever until now. The Forbidden Scroll. Seneca the Elder was a history buff. We knew he wrote a massive history of Rome covering the civil wars between Pompey and Caesar, but it vanished. We only knew it existed because other writers quoted it. It was considered one of the great lost books of antiquity. The AI analysis of the new fragments suggests we have found it, or at least a contemporary account very similar to it. The text describes the political atmosphere in the Senate just before Caesar crossed the Rubicon. It talks about the betrayal, the bribes, the fear in the eyes of the senators. This is explosive. It means we aren't just getting a textbook version of history, we are getting the inside baseball version. The scroll describes the concilia, the secret plans. It details the maneuvers of generals that were erased from the official imperial histories later on. Why was this in Piso's library? Think about it. Piso was Caesar's family. This library wasn't just a collection of books. It was an archive of the regime. They were keeping the records of how they took power. It is like finding the private emails of a modern political campaign. The scroll mentions names of conspirators we have never heard of. It fills in the gaps of the years 49 to 48 BC. It clarifies the timeline of battles. It is raw, unfiltered data from the ancient world, and the preservation is stunning. The Vesuvius challenge scans show that the scroll is actually in better condition inside the roll than we thought. The carbonization froze the papyrus in place. The main problem is just the geometry, unfolding the digital data without mixing up the layers. The combination of Philodemus and Seneca in the same room changes our understanding of the villa. It wasn't just a philosopher's retreat, it was a power center. On one shelf, you have books telling you how to be calm and virtuous. On the next shelf, you have detailed reports on how to crush your enemies and take over the Republic. It highlights the hypocrisy and the complexity of the Roman elite. They were ruthless conquerors who liked to pretend they were simple philosophers. The frozen bees of the title might not be here, but the frozen words are buzzing with activity. The text is alive, but it gets even wilder. The layout of the villa suggests that we have only found a fraction of the library. The excavation in the 1750s was done via tunnels. They didn't clear the whole house. They just poked holes in the walls, found a room with shelves, and emptied it. Archaeologists believe that the Latin library and the Greek library were often separate rooms in grand Roman houses. We found mostly Greek scrolls. The discovery of these few Latin fragments suggests the main Latin library. The room with the major historical texts, the poetry, the legal documents, is still down there, and there is a very good chance it is perfectly preserved. Digging deeper. This is where the wild theories come in. And they aren't just conspiracy nonsense, they are based on architectural logic. The Villa of the Papyri is massive. It stretches down towards the ancient coastline. We have only explored a small percentage of it. Theory number 1, the main library is still there. The 1800 scrolls we found might just be the overflow room or a personal study. If the main Latin library is found, it could double or triple the amount of literature we have from ancient Rome. We are talking about lost plays by Sophocles, lost books of Livy, maybe even early Christian texts. Some scholars speculate that because the eruption happened in 79 AD, there is a non-zero chance of finding early references to the Jesus movement. The Gospel of Mark was written around 70 AD. Could a copy have made it to a wealthy library in Herculaneum? It is unlikely, as early Christians were poor and unconnected, but it is not physically impossible. Theory number 2, the bunker theory. The way the scrolls were stacked, some in cabinets, some in boxes in the middle of the room, suggests they were being packed. When the mountain started smoking, the librarians might have been trying to evacuate the collection. This means the most valuable scrolls might be found near the exits or in the safe rooms of the villa, which haven't been excavated yet. Theory number 3, the shadow government. The presence of such detailed political history suggests Piso was keeping compromising material on his rivals. The villa wasn't just a library, it was an intelligence archive. If we decode more, we might find out who really killed who beyond the official story. The current excavation is difficult. The ground is waterlogged and the volcanic rock is hard. Digging it up risks destroying the unexcavated parts. That is why the AI scanning is so crucial. We don't need to dig everything up if we can perfect the virtual unwrapping. We can eventually bring portable scanners to the site. But the wildest theory is about the master plan. Some researchers think the scrolls were chemically treated with cedar oil or citrus extracts to preserve them before the eruption. That might be why the lead content is so high in the ink. They were trying to archive this knowledge for the future, knowing that paper rots. They didn't expect a volcano, but they were obsessed with legacy. The result of the Vesuvius challenge, the success of the AI, has forced analysts back to the lab because it proves the concept works. Now every museum in Europe is looking at their lumps of charcoal differently. There are scrolls in Paris, London, and Naples that were written off as garbage. Now they are potential gold mines. We are standing on the edge of a renaissance of lost knowledge. The voices in the ash. So what happens next? Because let's be clear about one thing, this isn't just a cool science experiment anymore. This isn't some dusty academics playing with puzzles in a museum basement. This is an arms race. The Vesuvius challenge is still running and the stakes are getting higher every single day. The goal has shifted. It is no longer just about reading a few words or deciphering a single paragraph about the color purple or the taste of capers. The goal now is total extraction. The goal is to read an entire scroll from start to finish, and you have to understand the speed at which this is happening. The technology is improving exponentially. We are talking about AI models that are getting smarter, faster, and more aggressive every single week. They require less human input and are starting to see things our eyes would miss in a million years. It is like giving a supercomputer a pair of X-ray glasses and telling it to read a burnt newspaper from 2,000 years ago without ever unfolding it. The AI is learning to detect the microscopic changes in the carbon structure of the papyrus where the ink sat. It's not seeing color, it's seeing texture on an atomic level. We are standing on the edge of a cliff and we are about to jump. We are about to flood the world with new ancient literature. Just imagine for a second, what if we found a new play by Shakespeare tomorrow? Or a lost notebook where Albert Einstein unified physics? That is the scale of what is happening here, but it is even bigger. We aren't just looking for poems, we are going to learn about Roman medicine. Did they have cures we forgot about? We are going to learn about their engineering. How did they build concrete that lasts longer than ours? We are going to see their true political thoughts, the stuff they couldn't say in public, and the gritty reality of their daily lives. But you see, this is where the theories get wild. The experts are whispering behind closed doors about what we might actually find. The internet is buzzing with speculation, and when you look at who owned this villa, Lucius Calpurnius Piso, the father-in-law of Julius Caesar, some of the possibilities are absolutely mind-blowing. Let's break down the terrifying, exciting, and game-changing possibilities. Wild theory number 1, the missing history. Historians estimate that we have lost about 99% of all ancient writing. Gone. Dust. But what if the Villa of the Papyri holds the missing pieces? There are huge rumors that these scrolls could contain the lost books of Livy. Livy was the most famous Roman historian who ever lived. His books covered the entire history of Rome, from the wolf nursing Romulus and Remus all the way to the empire. But here is the tragedy. We only have about a quarter of his work. The rest is missing. If those books are in that villa, we would fill in massive black holes in our timeline. We would finally know what really happened during the wars and revolutions that shaped the Western world. We act like we know Roman history, but we are actually looking at it through a keyhole. Finding Livy's lost books would be like kicking down the door and seeing the whole room for the first tea. Wild theory number 2, the religious bombshell. This is the one that makes people nervous. This is the one that keeps theologians awake at night. Herculaneum was destroyed in 79 AD. That is just a few decades after the events of the New Testament. At this exact time, early Christianity was spreading through the empire. It was underground, it was dangerous, and it was happening right there in the Bay of Naples. What if there is a scroll down there that mentions it? Think about it. What if there is a contemporary account of biblical figures? A Roman official's report on a troublemaker from Galilee? Or worse, what if there is a text that contradicts everything we think we know about the origins of modern religion? There is a theory that the Q source, the hypothetical lost gospel that Matthew and Luke used as a reference, could be sitting in a jar, carbonized in Herculaneum. Finding a document like that wouldn't just change history books. It could shake the foundations of faith for millions of people. It would be the single greatest discovery in human history and also the most controversial. Wild theory number 3, the secret technology. We know the Romans were advanced. They had indoor plumbing, heated floors, and complex machines. But there is a theory that they knew even more, and that this knowledge was hoarded by the elite. Remember the Antikythera mechanism? That ancient computer found in a shipwreck that could predict astronomical positions? That shouldn't have existed. It was 1,000 years ahead of its time. Some researchers believe the scrolls could contain the blueprints for machines like that. But it goes deeper. What many overlooked is that the Romans were master navigators. There are fringe theories, supported by strange anomalies in ancient maps, that the Romans knew about lands across the ocean. Could there be a map in that library that shows the coastline of Brazil or North America drawn 1,400 years before Columbus set sail? And what about Greek fire, the weaponized flamethrower formula that was lost to time, or the formula for flexible glass? If we find the engineering manuals in this villa, we might not just learn history. We might rediscover future technology in the ashes of the past. Wild theory number 4, the Assassin's Manifesto. This is where the connection to Julius Caesar becomes terrifying. The owner of the villa, Piso, was Caesar's father-in-law. He was in the inner circle. We have always been told the story of Caesar's assassination by the victors. We know what Brutus said, we know what the Senate said, but what if the villa contains the private letters? Some historians speculate that there could be a collection of correspondence detailing the true political conspiracy behind the fall of the Republic. Not the propaganda version, but the dirty, bloody truth. We could find a confession scroll. We could find proof that the assassination wasn't about saving the Republic, but about something much darker: money, debt, or a secret pact we never knew existed. If we find those letters, we have to rewrite the biography of the most famous man in history. Wild theory number 5, the lost medical cure. This sounds like science fiction, but stick with me. The ancients used plants and compounds that have since gone extinct. There was a plant called silphium, used by the Romans as a miracle cure-all and a contraceptive. It was worth its weight in gold, and then it vanished. The villa of the Papyri was a center for Epicurean philosophy, which was obsessed with the body, pleasure, and health. It is highly probable that their library contains botanical encyclopedias. What if they had a cure for a disease that still plagues us today? What if they had identified antibiotic properties in fungi that we haven't discovered yet? We could literally find a cure for cancer buried in a lump of charcoal from 79 AD. It's a long shot, but the possibility is non-zero. So what do you think? Is there a second massive library still hiding under the mud of Herculaneum, waiting to be found? And if we find a lost gospel or a history that changes everything we know about Rome, will the world accept it? Let me know your wild theories in the comments below. If you want to see us dive deeper into the lower library theory, smash that like button and subscribe. You do not want to miss what comes next.